Hello everyone, I'm JG and welcome back to Music Forever, where today I'm bringing you guys a review for the new JPEGMAFIA record, All My Heroes Are Cornballs. This is the follow-up project to last year's Veteran, the album that introduced me and a lot of people to JPEGMAFIA's music, and I quickly fell in love with his style and sound on that project. He had a really interesting take on the kind of experimental, noisy style of hip-hop that's been popular this decade. Maintaining a really glitchy, noisy sound that you'd come to expect from in a kind of weird experimental hip-hop album, but at the same time mixing in this really larger-than-life personality, really overblown, but at the same time insightful and at times even funny lyrics as well. Some nice singing mixed in as well, and some more modern sounding hip-hop influences too, particularly from some trap sounding instrumentals at times that seem to work their way into the noisier, glitchier mess of that album's soundscape. Overall, Veteran was a great album, like I've been saying, and I was really excited to see what he was going to do with his follow-up record, which, given some of the singles for this thing, also had me really excited because I really liked a lot of the teaser tracks for this record, and after hearing this thing a good few times now, I have to say this is another great record from JPEGMAFIA. In fact, I even go as far as to say that this is an improvement over Veteran, because I feel like whereas that album was JPEGMAFIA really coming into his own with the sound that he had crafted for himself on that project, I feel like this album here is an extension of that sound, but at the same time a refinement of it. The soundscape of this album is one that I wouldn't say is all too different from what was on Veteran. You still have some really noisy, glitchy instrumentals across this thing. A lot of these instrumentals are very chaotic. They have a lot going on within them. At times they could be a bit aggressive and in your face, but other times too, they can sound really beautiful and just heavenly as well. Some of the cuts on this thing, like the opening cut to this thing, also the lead single, Jesus Forgive Me, I Am a Thought, or Beta Male Strategies, or Grimy Waifu, for example, see JPEGMAFIA rapping over some instrumentals that are a bit more laid back than some of the beats that he was, most prominently rapping over on Veteran, but at the same time, these instrumentals, while they are a bit more laid back in a sense, they still maintain that glitchy, noisy sound that he's been known for, and they still, are really textured, really detailed, really chaotic in a sense as well, and just really entertaining to listen to. There are still a lot of moments on this record, however, that feature JPEGMAFIA rapping over some really aggressive, noisy instrumentals as well. Probably one of the more prominent moments on this thing, I think, comes on the back half of the track Keenan vs. Kel, which is just a really fantastic beat switch, if I might say. And the second half of this track, it's noisy, it's in your face, it's really bold, but at the same time, it's incredibly addicting. Another thing that I really like about the instrumentals here on this record and just the sound of this record overall is how it all kind of comes together to make a very cohesive package with this project. I feel like all the songs on this thing flow into each other really nicely to the point where I think listening to this thing as an album and not just individual tracks makes the entire thing more enjoyable than if you were just to sit down and listen to maybe a few individual songs on this thing, or maybe shuffle this album's order up. I think the way that this album is structured and how everything is laid out is done so in a way where everything flows together really nicely and never really feels like you're getting too much of one style all in a row or something. He's always switching things up here on this record. You'll have a nice mix of noisier songs, more aggressive songs, more laid back songs, some tracks with some more singing in them, some tracks that are more rapping focused, some tracks that are a bit shorter. There's a nice mix of styles here on this thing, and the instrumentals really help tie everything together into a cohesive listen. Outside of the production on this album, I feel like JPEGMAFIA's rapping and singing and lyrics on this project are really fantastic as well. His rapping, when he decides to really go in here on this project, is really great. He has a lot of great flows here, and one thing that I was really pleasantly surprised by here on this project is how much singing he decides to do here as well. I really liked it on Veteran whenever JPEG Mafia was doing his singing, so I'm happy to see that here on this new project, he's doing it a little bit more. It's not to the point where it, completely dominates over the rapping or anything. It's not even, equal in amount to the rapping here on this project. However, I do like a lot of the singing that he brings here to these songs, whether it be with a really smooth verse that he decides to give us, or a really catchy hook here. I feel like his singing voice is really great, and it mixes in very nicely at times with some of these really glitchy but really just kind of beautiful sounding instrumentals. Another thing on this record that I really enjoy is whenever JPEGMAFIA is able to really go back and forth nice and smoothly between his more aggressive delivery and some of the more beautiful sounding singing of his. Probably one of the finest examples here on this project is on the opening track to this thing, Jesus Forgive Me, I Am a Thought. Probably one of my favorite songs, not only on this record, probably one of my favorite songs of the year, generally speaking. I feel like this is just one of, if not the best song JPEGMAFIA has penned to date, featuring this really smooth flow of his at parts on the track, mixed with some really nice smooth singing as well. However, he just as quickly moves into this more aggressive flow on this track as well. That also sounds really great. I think the instrumental does a great job of backing up his constant switching between these different styles, and the hook of this track is incredibly catchy as well. And that one part where he goes, "You better count your blessings for real," and the real part is just like manipulated in a way to sound super cool. That's one of the best moments in music of 2019. I will say that much. JPEGMAFIA's lyrics here on this album are great once again. Lyrically, he seems to be dealing with a lot of these same general ideas that he was tackling on Veteran. However, he oftentimes presents them in new and interesting ways, and he still maintains that larger-than-life, really kind of overblown personality that I really enjoyed seeing on Veteran. One where he's able to talk about a lot of serious issues, whether they be social issues, political issues, or just things about his own personal life, but he's able to portray it in this way that's kind of humorous at times, that's really silly as well, is really, like I said several times at this point, over the top and overblown, but in the best way possible. Just looking at these song titles here on this project, you should know right off the bat that you're going to be in for some really interesting song ideas and topics, like the track Grimy Waifu, for example, which is about JPEGMAFIA kind of rapping about his gun as like his waifu, I guess. Interesting approach to the subject matter, but one I can't say I've heard before. You also have the track Post-Verified Lifestyle, which kind of reflects on JPEGMAFIA's career following, kind of blowing up last year with Veteran, and of course kind of living that post-verified lifestyle, of course referring to being verified on Twitter, something that tends to happen to people once they, kind of blow up and become a bit more successful and well-known. A lot of this record lyrically sees JPEGMAFIA kind of talking about his life since the release of Veteran, how he's kind of blown up to some extent, kind of reflecting on this in interesting ways. I mean, even the title of this record itself and the title track that corresponds with it, All My Heroes Are Cornballs, is kind of a reflection on the fact that a lot of the people that we look up to in everyday life oftentimes, are cornballs. Aside from that, you have JPEGMAFIA also taking a lot of shots on this thing at a lot of the same groups that he was doing on Veteran as well, whether it be people like racist or just haters, more generally speaking, incels, things of that sort. And regardless of what JPEGMAFIA is talking about here on this project, he's always presenting it in such a creative and interesting and oftentimes funny way as well. There's so many fun, quotable lines across this project. JPEGMAFIA really has a knack for writing lyrics that, while in one sense are really, funny and captivating in that regard, also have a lot more depth to them as well if you're willing to look into them. If I had any complaints with this project, which I really don't have many, I would probably say that maybe some of the cuts later on in the record aren't as interesting as some of the ones towards the front half of this thing, particularly tracks like Dot's Freestyle Remix or Buttermilk Jesus type beat, for example. Still really good songs, but maybe just not on the same level of quality necessarily as some of the best material on this project, but that's a very minor complaint that I have with this album, because really, this is a fantastic album at the end of the day. I think that it really takes the high-quality material that JPEGMAFIA was making on Veteran and refines it in a way to the point where it's even more enjoyable here on this project. For as much as I liked Veteran, probably the biggest issue I had with that record is that at times, sonically speaking, it was a bit all over the place. That's not quite the case here with this project. I feel like this new album here is even more cohesive, but at the same time it doesn't do that at the expense of being less diverse and less interesting sounding. There's just as, if not more, ideas present here on this new record, but they're pulled together in such a more cohesive manner with how the beats are constructed here on this thing and how JPEGMAFIA goes about ordering the track list here on this album. Again, the instrumentals on this thing are fantastic, as is the overall flow of this record. JPEGMAFIA's rapping and singing and lyrics here are also fantastic as well. Overall, this is just a really fun, creative, and exciting experimental hip-hop project. And while there have been plenty of those released in the last few years or so particularly, I don't think there's one out there quite like this one unless you're going to consider some of JPEGMAFIA's previous material, because I do feel like this new album here does build off of those pretty heavily. However, I don't think that's necessarily a bad thing. If anything, I kind of feel like the sound of this album here is like the sound that was on Veteran, but just taken to the next level. So if you happen to be looking for some really fun, creative, exciting hip-hop releases, this new record here from JPEGMAFIA is definitely one that you should check out. And even if you aren't necessarily looking for a record quite like that, this is still a record that you should consider checking out, because I think it's definitely one of the year's strongest so far. And considering how strong 2019 has already been so far for album releases, I think that really says a lot for the quality of this record here. Definitely give this thing a listen. And with that said, that concludes everything I want to cover here in my review today. Everything I said here is just my own personal opinion, so if you happen to disagree, that's perfectly fine. In fact, feel free to leave your own thoughts on this album in the comment section down below. And while you're down there, make sure you also leave a like on the video and subscribe to the channel for more music-related content, things like album reviews, track reviews, things of that sort. If you enjoy that kind of content, make sure you subscribe. Thank you for watching once again, and stay golden.